Hi guys. Okay, so today I am here to talk you through an essay for Year of Wonders. So we're going to look at the essay structure, and I'm just basically going to talk you through the PowerPoint that you've got. But I find that some kids just kind of like to hear someone talk them through it because it just makes it a little easier. Anyway, so let's get started. Here are my gorgeous kids. All right, let's pull this up. Okay, here we go. Oh, look, animations. I'm so clever. Not really. PowerPoint does it all for you. Anyway, okay, so the first thing you need to do is to pick the right question for you. There's a good reason we give you two questions. Obviously, not every question is great for every student. Some people read one question and they're like, sick, this is killer, I'm going to murder this question. And then some people hate that question, and that's fine. So pick the one, not necessarily that is the easiest question to pick, that has like the most obvious response, but perhaps the one that you kind of go, I agree to an extent, but there are also other things that I could say. That's the question you want to pick. You want the question where you have lots to say, not necessarily the question with the easiest answer. So the question that I am going to be looking at with you guys today is this one here. The male characters in Year of Wonders are all weak. Is this how you see the novel? Okay, so that's the question I'm going to explore throughout this as like my model. Okay, so the male characters in Year of Wonders are all weak. Is this how you see the novel? So the second thing you do, once you pick your question, the second thing you do is you highlight key terms. Okay, so key terms are words that it's like the whole question kind of centers around, and usually you'll have several in a question. In this one, there are kind of two main words, male and weak. Okay, and these are words that I'm going to need to very clearly address in my answer, and they're the questions that I can kind of debate upon. Okay, so I could kind of go, yes, male characters are weak. I could also look at female characters as well and maybe do like a bit of a comparison between the two. That would be kind of cool. And obviously the word weak there, and I can debate that and go, well, some are weak and some are strong, some are kind of both. Some are sometimes weak and some are sometimes strong and blah, blah, blah. So they're the words that our answer should pivot around. Okay, and these are the words that should turn up a lot in your essay. Okay, so now we've got our key terms. The next thing we do, by the way, do you like all the pictures that I picked? They're of either like interpretations of the book, or they're of like the actual place of Eyam. Here we have the graveyard where so many of them were buried. Or the actual plague survivors, plague victims. All right, let's keep going. All right, so step 3, so step 1, pick the question. Step 2, pull the question apart. Step 3, write out my contention. Okay, so decide what you feel like is the answer to the question. Now, my answer may be different to your answer, and that's totally fine, as long as we can both justify our answers. That's the great thing about English. We can all be correct. Why I was always terrible at maths. Why can't we all be right? So decide what your answer is. That's your contention. And then what I want you to do is write that statement out using the key words in the question. Okay? So in my case, I need to use the word weak and male. Okay? So I've come up with mine, and here mine is here. Hang on, I'll get my big dumb head out of the way. Okay. So my contention was, many of the male characters in the text demonstrate unforgivable weakness at pivotal times within the text, which leads the reader to disapprove of them. Although these men can be weak at times, there are moments where male characters show real strength, even if that is fleeting. It is not only men who show weakness in times of desperation, as there are female characters who also make poor choices in the text. Okay, so can you see how many times I've used weak and man or men in there? And I've also kind of highlighted when I have chosen to invert the question. Invert means like turn it inside out on itself. Okay, so the opposite, obviously, of weakness is strength, and the opposite to male is obviously female. Shock horror. So clever. So what I've done there is kind of, really examine the question from multiple perspectives. And the other thing that I've kind of tried to do in my contention here is, within the contention, I've kind of come up with 3 ideas. Now, I've done that deliberately so that when I have to write out my arguments, all I have to do is kind of split up my contention. Okay, so that essentially my contention is my arguments. Does that make sense? So the contention, within my contention, there are 3 kind of ideas. And then I'll use each one of those ideas, each one of those 3 ideas to be my arguments, which then gives me an argument, an idea or an argument for each paragraph. Okay, so plan my arguments is step 4. Because I preemptive struck, I realized I needed 3 arguments. So I came up with a contention that kind of had 3 ideas in it. So my 3 arguments are going to be: many of the male characters in the text demonstrate unforgivable weakness at pivotal times, and that leads us to disapprove of them. Okay, so male characters are weak, we don't like them. Okay, at this step, I like to plan out my evidence a little bit as well. So I then kind of go, okay, well, what evidence would I use? So for instance, where do we find men in this story where they are weak and we don't like them? I mean, it's not hard to look. It's not hard to find them, is it? So we've got Montpellier. Excuse me. I swear, no COVID. I'm just inept at obviously managing my own saliva. So Montpellier loses his faith as soon as he faces a crisis, which is obviously Eleanor's murder. Sorry. So that could be one piece of evidence I use for that argument. Josiah Bont's greed, and his greed is his weakness, and it's highlighted when he becomes the grave digger and is willing to throw away any basic morality. He buries a dude that's not even dead. Not a great bloke. And then another one that I came up with maybe even Mr. Bradford. And I could talk about how Mr. Bradford leaves as soon as he feels that he's at threat. He says that he's moving away for his family, but we all know that he's a big liar. He's doing it because he's afraid for himself. He doesn't care about his family because he sends his family right back there when he thinks that they are jeopardizing his reputation. So I don't know if you're such a family man. Calm down. So that's my first argument, and I kind of plan out my ideas. My second argument for this is going to be, although these men can be weak at times, there are moments where male characters show real strength, even if it's fleeting. Okay, so I'm going to talk about male characters showing strength and showing that even though these characters sometimes show weakness, but they also show strength. And I think we have to admit that Montpellier does have moments where he is a really strong character. He shows real strength. So I've got Montpellier standing up to the Bradfords when they're abandoning the town. That would have been tough for him to do because he's basically yelling at his boss. In terms of social hierarchy, the Bradfords are his superior, and back then that was a big deal to basically have a go at your superior. So that Thomas Stanley is the old priest. You know how he comes back to unite the town behind Montpellier's proposal. I would say that's a real strength. it would be a hard thing for someone like him to do, to swallow his pride and kind of go, look, I'm going to support this guy who basically replaced me. So I put him in. And then the third one that I came up with was George Vickers, because I love that guy. He seems like such a nice dude. So George Vickers, he tried to save Anna and her family from infection by sending them away and trying to die alone. That takes real strength, to, try and protect others in your dying moments. So I put him as another guy who shows strength. So that's my second argument. Then my third argument I came up with was to look at, instead of kind of just talking about men and their weakness, I thought, no, I should also talk about how there are women that are weak too. So I said, it is not only men who show weakness in times of desperation, as there are female characters who also make poor choices in the text. Okay, so I'm kind of inverting the question there. And I think when you are inverting a question, particularly, a big part of the question, like the bit about males, I think that really works well as a third paragraph. So that's why I've kind of put that one there. So I've got, in terms of evidence, I've got Afra's choice to rely on witchcraft. Not a great choice. Anna's reliance on opium, that is a weakness. I mean, we don't judge her for it, we don't condemn her for it, but it certainly is a weakness. And then Lib, Anna's friend, who in her grief for losing her family members, she persecutes the Gowdies. So we've got those three there. So that is my plan so far. Now let's talk about intros. Now intros are key to get right because they really show us whether when I say us, I mean like your markers, your teacher. They show us whether, you can answer this question or not. And as you guys would know, answering the question is one of those key things that you have to do in order to get an S. So the things that you need in an intro: TACA. Title, author, contention, arguments. That's all you need. 4 things. That'll do ya, right? Don't try and get fancy and tell me the story again or any mumbo jumbo like that. I don't need it. I read the book, okay? I've probably read it more than you. So assume I know the story. You don't need to tell me the story. Just tell me what the title is, the author is, what's your contention, and what are your arguments. And use those keywords. Now, if you have a look at my example, you'll notice that the keywords are all highlighted in this, highlighted in this, I'm pointing, but obviously, anyway, in this example. And I've done that so that you can see how often I make sure that I'm using the keywords or synonyms for those keywords. And that's important because you don't want to sound like you're repeating yourself. Boring, right? So, making sure that you're using those keywords and synonyms to make sure that you are, because every time you use one of the keywords, what you're doing is waving to your examiner, your marker, and going, I'm answering the question. See, right here where I've used that word, it's because I'm answering the question. This is relevant. Okay, and that's a really good thing to get in the habit of doing, because once we're looking at year 12 marking and exam marking, they're marking quick, so you really want to make sure that they are certain you're answering the question. So let's have a look at my example. Title, author, contention, argument. Here it is. So Geraldine Brooks, author. Geraldine Brooks's, oh my goodness, that should have an apostrophe after the S. Anyway, Geraldine Brooks's The Year of Wonders, title. A fictional rendering is a fictional, oh God, I should have proofread this better, shouldn't I? I'm ashamed. Is a fictional rendering of the 17th century plague that engulfed Eam or Am or it, whatever, however you want to pronounce it. Here's my contention. It is through this retelling that Brooks explores the weaknesses of both sexes during times of crisis. Here come my arguments. When portraying the weaknesses of men, Brooks chooses to make their behaviours unforgiving to the readers. In contrast, women who show weakness during desperate times are portrayed as victims of circumstance rather than villains. Finally, Brooks doesn't portray all men as only weak. She does give some male characters moments of strength. Okay, so what I've done there, title, author, contention, arguments, no fluffy stuff, no extra styrofoam that you're kind of packing into this box. It's just, what am I going to argue? What is this about? What are my arguments? Okay, bang, bang, bang. And that's it. That's your intro. I'm going to stop you there because I'm going to teach you how to do teal stuff in the next one. Bye.